Alright, so today I want to introduce you to the Plutonium ball python. The Plutonium consists of two genes, the bamboo and the hidden gene woma. And if you're wondering what a bamboo looks like, the snake around my neck here, this is a bamboo ball python. This is Bobby, my bamboo. It's a really impressive gene just as a standalone gene without any other genes in the mix. And it's actually a co-dominant mutation. So if you breed bamboo to something else, half the offspring come out as bamboos. And kind of the challenge with the bamboo is when you mix a lot of other genes into the bamboo, a lot of times it can be really visually dominant and overwhelm a lot of other genes. And if you actually mix hidden gene woma into the bamboo, you get some really impressive visual combinations, especially working other genes into the plutonium. So in this video, I want to jump over to the internet and I want to show you the potential of the plutonium ball python. Alright, so I want to jump over here on Morphmarket.com and I want to show you the two genes that make up the plutonium. And the first one I want to show you is the bamboo. This is what a bamboo looks like. As a matter of fact, this is actually a picture of Bobby, the snake that I have around my neck at the beginning and the end of the video. And the cool thing about the bamboo is that a lot of times it has a high weight coming up the side of the snake. As a matter of fact, Bobby, I'd say, is probably the highest weight bamboo that I've seen. And I've actually produced whole clutches of bamboos that, you know, if I actually breed it to something else, about 50% of the clutch is bamboos. And a lot of times you'll have like a high white on some of them and kind of a mid white on others, and some of them have no white at all. It's kind of similar to the white on a spider. I don't think you can really breed for like a high white or a low white. It's just kind of a random anomaly as far as the white coming up the sides. As a matter of fact, I've seen a lot of bamboos that are really reduced. Almost looks like it has like Engi or something in there. Really reducing the pattern. I think sometimes you can have like this where it's not reduced at all and just randomly you have different levels of pattern reduction as just kind of the normal, kind of one of the weird anomalies of bamboo. Sometimes they can be high white or low white or sometimes really reduced and still be just a plain bamboo. It's pretty variable. And the bamboo is also in the blue-eyed leucistic complex. So if you read the bamboo or the plutonium to another gene in the blue-eyed leucistic complex, you'll end up with an all-white snake with bright blue eyes. Pretty awesome. And sometimes you want the white snake and sometimes you don't. Depends on, you know, if you have a whole bunch of genes and you produce the white snake, the white snake essentially masks all the other genes in the mix. So here is another component of the plutonium, and this is the hidden gene woma. And at first glance, you're probably thinking this kind of looks like maybe a cross between a spider and an Engi, kind of like a reduced spider pattern. As a matter of fact, this looks exactly like a woma ball python, and I think that's kind of where the hidden gene woma kind of looks like. You know, it looks exactly like a woma. If you actually put the hidden gene woma and the woma side by side, you really can't tell the difference between them visually, but if you start breeding them into other genes, you can definitely tell the difference between a woma and a hidden gene woma. And probably the best example of the differences between the two is if you actually take a hidden gene woma and you breed it with a lesser, and you get a lesser hidden gene woma. That's actually called the soul sucker. Have you seen the soul sucker? But it looks completely different than the lesser combined with the woma. It's a really big difference between the two. When you start breeding them into other combinations, you can definitely tell the difference between the hidden gene woma and the woma. And if you actually take the hidden gene woma and you mix it with the bamboo, take a look at this, you get the plutonium. And this is kind of an interesting combination. Essentially, you get like a bamboo looking snake with a really reduced pattern. Really kind of reduces it from your regular pattern on the regular bamboo. And it's really variable as far as the white on the side. Sometimes it can be a really high white and sometimes it can be a really low white. And this one's probably the highest white that I've seen, even higher than most of your bamboos, comes all the way up the top. Pretty amazing combination. So I wanted to show you the potential when working other genes into the plutonium so you can really see the effect what other genes have in the mix. And I want to start with the pastel. And the pastel is probably one of the most popular genes in all of ball pythons. It's a really bright yellow gene. It really brings in a lot of yellow and really reduces the pattern, kind of reduces the normal, like the Roswell gray alien heads. And here's what happens if you work pastel into the plutonium. Take a look at this. This is pretty amazing. I actually get a pastel plutonium, and what it does is it essentially just kind of washes out the whole snakes, give you this creamy color, and you can definitely tell the bamboo is still in there, and you kind of get this jumbled up pattern from the hidden gene woma, and the pastel just really mellows it out, makes for a really interesting combo. As a matter of fact, if you actually take pastel and you work it into a bamboo, I've actually done this cross before, and I've had a whole clutch where I have bamboos and bamboo pastels, and you can't tell the difference when they hatch. It's really frustrating talking about identifying hatchlings and trying to figure out which is which. If you actually have, you know, the hatchlings, you really can't tell the difference until they actually start aging and maturing, and the older pastel bamboos start getting a lot more yellow color as they age and mature. It's kind of the trick. You almost have to hold on to them for a couple months to really tell the difference between the pastel bamboos and the regular bamboos. And sometimes I just sell them, you know, especially if I sell a hatchling, sometimes I'll sell them as a bamboo, possible pastel, and then, you know, like a year later, people show me the snake and it'll be like this bright yellow bamboo. It's a pretty amazing transformation when you're working pastel into bamboo. So take a look at this. This is actually the Super Pastel. So this is 2 copies of the pastel. And we actually have a Super Pastel. A lot of times it brings out even more yellow. But really the interesting thing about the Super Pastels is it really jumbles up the pattern. You get some really crazy patterns when you mix Super Pastels into other combinations. And here's what happens if you work Super Pastel into the Plutonium. Take a look at this crazy snake. This is probably one of the craziest bamboo combos that I've ever seen. It almost looks almost exactly like a bamboo, but it has this really crazy pattern, and that is between the combination of the hidden gene woma and the Super Pastel. As a matter of fact, I'm thinking this one probably isn't that old. This is like 213 grams, and I can almost guarantee that once this ages and matures, it'll probably really brighten up. You'll get like a brighter yellow coming through as it ages and matures. It's kind of the weird anomaly with pastel and bamboo. So here is the Engi. The Engi is essentially a pattern reduction gene where a lot of times you'll get almost tiger stripes in a lot of cases. And a lot of times with the Engi, you'll also get a lot of oranges coming out. And it really depends on the line of Engi. I've seen some Engis like this one is more of a pattern reduction. Some Engis are really bright orange, and some of them hardly reduce the pattern at all. And some of them don't really bring in a lot of oranges. It can be pretty variable depending on the line of Engi. And here's what happens if you work Engi into the plutonium. Take a look at this. This is kind of an interesting combo. And you notice on a lot of these, you'll end up with kind of a creamy looking snake, which is usually pretty characteristic of a lot of the bamboo combos. And you can definitely see the bamboo really dominating the visual appearance of the snake. That's pretty much what you'd see in most bamboo combos. And in this case, you actually see a lot of the reduction of the pattern. As a matter of fact, if you work Engi into like a pinstripe or like a lemon blast or something like that, you get these little, the pattern reduction almost into these little blobs on the snake, all the way down the top of the snake, and that is pretty characteristic of Engi in a lot of combinations. So here is the leopard. The leopard's an interesting gene. As a matter of fact, I want to add leopard to my collection someday. It is pretty amazing. It's actually a really dark morph. If you mix it with the right genes, sometimes it'll darken it. Sometimes if you mix it with the right genes like banana or coral glow, it doesn't really darken the gene, the snake with the combination of those, but it really jumbles up the pattern. In pretty much all cases, you get a really crazy pattern enhancement. And here's what happens if you work leopard into the plutonium. Take a look at this crazy snake. And it's kind of interesting on this one, it really darkens the background and really jumbles up the pattern almost into like little freckles. It is probably one of the most amazing combinations that I've seen with the bamboo. Really changes the pattern. And kind of the cool thing that I like about a lot of leopard combinations is a lot of times it'll bring stripes right down the back, especially if you work leopard in with lesser. A lot of times you get stripes. Sometimes you get like multiple stripes, which is pretty cool. And this one actually has some other possible genes in the mix. So this is a pastel, bamboo, leopard, hidden gene woma. So this is actually, this is the leopard, plutonium with pastel. And I'd say at a small age like this, you really can't see the pastel. Maybe a little bit of yellow barely coming through. And then the yellow belly is probably enhancing the yellow. That's probably where a lot of the yellow is coming from. And then the red axanthic, a lot of the genes are really buried underneath the bamboo bamboo, sometimes you can't tell the difference, but I'm pretty sure that if you actually mix leopard with the plutonium, you'd end up with a snake like this. Pretty amazing combo. So here is the cinnamon. The cinnamon's an interesting gene. It's actually another dark morph. It's allelic with black pastel. So as a matter of fact, I actually kind of ran into cinnamon in my collection, and the hard part is if you actually have an unknown gene and you think it's cinnamon, it could actually be black pastel too. If you actually breed cinnamon to black pastel, you get an 8-ball, which is a completely patternless, completely jet black snake, which is pretty awesome. And here's what happens if you work cinnamon into the plutonium. Take a look at this. This is a really interesting combination. Look at the sides on this. That is really a kind of a weird kind of a pattern, really kind of a gray color. Makes for a really interesting combination, and it's kind of amazing that the cinnamon can really darken the bamboo that much. There's not a lot of genes that can actually break through the bamboo and change it, and I find it kind of interesting on this one that the cinnamon is giving this line right on the back, and I'm thinking that must be the combination between the cinnamon and the hidden gene woma to make that line, and you can definitely still see the bamboo in there. It makes for a really crazy combination. So here's the last one I want to show you, and that's working banana into the mix. And the banana is a really visually dominant gene as well. It's probably up there high in the list between I'd say it's probably on par with the bamboo and the banana. They're really high. And then, you know, probably the top of the list, the most visually dominant would be the albino. You mix anything with albino and you'll actually get an albino looking snake that is kind of jumbled up in a pattern, but it looks like an albino. It's kind of the same way with the banana and the bamboo. They can be really visually dominant. And here's what happens if you work banana into the plutonium. Take a look at this. Let me tell you, I saved the best for last. I think this is one of my favorite combos. As a matter of fact, when I first saw this, I was thinking, yep, I definitely need to breed banana into my bamboos. Look at that crazy snake. That is pretty amazing. And it almost looks like a plutonium that someone just painted yellow. That is pretty amazing. And this actually has a couple other genes in the mix. This has Engi, which reduces the pattern a little bit more, might bring out a little more of the orange in the combination. And you also have spot nose. Spot nose is a really big pattern enhancement too. And kind of one of my favorite combos is a spot nose leopard. If you can actually mix leopard in with this, with a spot nose, Engi, bamboo, hidden gene woma, that would be really amazing. All right, so it is time for the question of the day. And Brett McKenzie asks, how would you prove out your cinnamon in the female that you think has cinnamon, but you're not 100% sure that it's actually in the mix? And that is a very good question. As a matter of fact, this is kind of a spin-off of one of my last videos where I produced a bunch of hatchlings and we were going through identifying them. And I think I may have produced a pewter, which is the combination of cinnamon and pastel. It kind of makes a silver colored snake. And I didn't even know cinnamon was in the mix. So I'm thinking I might have cinnamon in my female. And how would I prove it out? And I'd say probably one of the trickiest parts of proving out cinnamon is that it's really similar to black pastel. It's actually allelic with black pastel. So it's kind of, you know, that's kind of the defining moment of determining if you have cinnamon or black pastel in the mix. But either one of them, if you actually started with a cinnamon, a snake that you knew 100% sure cinnamon was in the mix, and you bred it back to that female, what you'd actually get 25% of the time, you would get a super cinnamon with 2 copies of the cinnamon. And that is a patternless snake that is completely like a jet black. Sometimes it's kind of a brownish black, but it's completely patternless. So you definitely know if you make a super cinnamon. And if you actually have a cinnamon and a black pastel, you get what is known as an 8-ball, which is kind of the same thing, a little bit darker of a snake. So that would be one way you could actually prove out whether there's cinnamon or black pastel in the mix. And really, you know, to try to tell the difference between cinnamon and black pastel, what you really need to do is you need to isolate the genes, and the genes by themselves. Usually cinnamon is not as dark as black pastel, and usually it's not as gold. Usually black pastel has more of a gold colored pattern and a darker background when compared to cinnamon. So that is pretty much it. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next video.